Deep within a forest, untouched and ancient, lay a village shrouded in mystery. It was called Eldergrove. The village was once a thriving community, but now it stood abandoned. The villagers were gone. Their homes were empty. Only whispers remained. The path to Eldergrove was treacherous and overgrown. Thorny bushes clawed at unwary travelers. Twisted trees cast long, eerie shadows. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. A silence, deep and unsettling, hung over the village. The village was a place of forgotten stories and lost memories. The wind sighed through the empty houses, carrying with it the echoes of laughter and sorrow. The once bright paint peeled from the walls, revealing the grey, weathered wood beneath. The gardens, once bursting with life, were now choked with weeds. Eldergrove was a place where time seemed to stand still. The air was thick with the feeling of being watched, of secrets whispered on the wind. Alex, a young explorer with a thirst for the unknown, had heard the whispers about Eldergrove. He was drawn to the village by its mystery, by the promise of uncovering its secrets. Armed with his wits, a compass, and a thirst for adventure, he ventured into the heart of the ancient forest. The forest seemed to close in around him as he walked. The trees loomed tall and menacing, their branches intertwining overhead like grasping claws. The sunlight, already weak, struggled to reach the forest floor, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on his eyes. Alex pressed on, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He stumbled upon the village as the sun began its final descent. The sight that greeted him sent a shiver down his spine. The houses stood in various states of disrepair, their windows dark and empty. Despite the eerie stillness, Alex felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever he might find, and stepped across the threshold into Eldergrove. The houses in Eldergrove were frozen in time. Dishes sat unwashed on tables and toys lay scattered on dusty floors. It was as if the villagers had simply vanished, leaving their lives behind. Alex wandered through the deserted homes, his footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. In one house, he found a child's diary, its pages filled with childish handwriting and drawings. The diary spoke of strange lights in the sky, of whispers in the night, and of a growing fear that had gripped the village. The final entry sent chills down Alex's spine. "They are coming!" As darkness fell, Alex sought refuge in the village library. The building was in a state of disrepair, but many of the books remained intact. He lit a lantern, its flickering light casting long shadows that danced across the shelves. He found an old leather-bound journal tucked away in a dark corner. As Alex began to read, he realized that he had stumbled upon the key to unlocking the village's secrets. Elias's journal told a tale of a village on the brink of despair. A terrible blight had fallen upon the land, crops had withered, and the villagers were starving. In their desperation, they turned to ancient rituals, seeking the help of powerful beings from beyond the veil. The beings answered their call. They offered the villagers a deal prosperity in exchange for a pact. The villagers, desperate and clinging to hope, agreed without hesitation. The pact brought prosperity. The blight vanished, the crops flourished, and the village thrived. But the pact came at a terrible price. The beings demanded tribute, not in gold or silver, but in something far more precious: the memories of the villagers. Year after year, the beings returned to claim their due. They feasted on the villagers' memories, leaving them hollow shells of their former selves. As Alex delved deeper into Elias's journal, he became aware of a presence in the library with him. He couldn't see it, but he could feel its eyes on him. The air grew cold, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He tried to ignore it, to focus on the words on the page, but the feeling intensified. He could hear the faint rustling of unseen robes, the soft whisper of breath on his neck. Fear coiled in his gut, cold and tight. Alex slammed the journal shut and spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. The library was empty. He was alone, or was he? The feeling of being watched persisted, a palpable weight on his chest. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he was not alone in Eldergrove. Something was watching him. He fled the library, his footsteps echoing in the silent night. Driven by a mixture of fear and determination, Alex sought answers in the village elder's house. The house, perched atop the highest hill in Eldergrove, was the largest and most imposing structure in the village. Its windows were dark, like empty eyes staring out into the night. Inside, the house was dark and oppressive. Cobwebs hung from every corner, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. Alex made his way through the house, his footsteps echoing ominously on the wooden floors. He found a hidden room behind a bookshelf in the elder's study. The room was small and dusty, lit by a single flickering candle. In the center of the room, resting on a pedestal, was a crystal orb. The orb pulsed with an inner light, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. As Alex reached out to touch the orb, a wave of dizziness washed over him. The visions intensified, swirling around him like a whirlpool. He saw the beings again, their forms shifting and changing before his eyes. They were creatures of shadow and flame, their voices a chorus of whispers that promised power and demanded sacrifice. He saw the village elder, his face etched with a terrible grief, as he offered up the memories of his people to appease the beings. He saw the village slowly wither and decay, its inhabitants becoming empty shells, their pasts lost forever. The visions were overwhelming, a torrent of images and emotions that threatened to drown him. He cried out, trying to shut them out, but they only grew stronger. He felt himself falling, tumbling into an abyss of darkness and despair. Just when he thought he could take no more, the visions abruptly stopped. The orb went dark and the room was plunged into silence. Alex collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, his mind reeling from what he had seen. He knew then that he had to do something. Elias's journal had hinted at a way to break the pact. It spoke of a ritual, a sacrifice of will and memory that could sever the ties that bound the village to the beings. The ritual was dangerous, fraught with peril, but it was their only hope. Armed with the knowledge gleaned from Elias's journal, Alex gathered the necessary materials and returned to the elder's house. He stood before the crystal orb, its surface reflecting his own determined face. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began the ritual. He spoke the words of power, his voice echoing in the silent room. He felt a surge of energy flow through him, connecting him to the orb, to the village, to the beings themselves. He poured his will into the orb, focusing all his energy on breaking the chains that bound Eldergrove. The room began to shake. The air crackled with energy. The crystal orb pulsed with an intense, blinding light. The light from the orb intensified, filling the room, the house, the village. It spread outward, a beacon of hope piercing the darkness that had shrouded Eldergrove for generations. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The orb went dark. The shaking stopped. Silence descended upon the village once more, but this time, the silence was different. It was no longer heavy with dread and despair. It was the silence of peace, of renewal, of hope reborn. Alex emerged from the elder's house, blinking in the light of the rising sun. The village, bathed in the golden glow of dawn, seemed different. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The oppressive weight that had hung over Eldergrove was gone. The village was free. As Alex prepared to leave Eldergrove, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He paused at the edge of this village, his gaze sweeping over the silent houses, the overgrown streets, the forest that pressed in on all sides. He couldn't see anyone, but he could feel it. A presence, faint but undeniable, watching him from the shadows. The beings were still out there, somewhere in the vastness beyond the veil. He had freed Eldergrove from their grasp, but he knew that they would not be so easily defeated. They would be back. He turned and walked away, leaving the village behind him. As he made his way through the forest, he couldn't help but wonder about the future. Would the beings return to Eldergrove? Would they seek him out, punish him for interfering in their plans? He didn't know the answers, but one thing was certain: he would never forget Eldergrove or the chilling tale of its lost secrets.